Did I start this? I did. We're going to do today, primarily, we're going to talk about chapter 5. I try not to do this. What I mean is I don't do it purposefully, but I can't help it over here sometimes when you guys are talking before class, and I heard somebody say something to the effect of, chapter 5 was fucking weird. Like I heard something like that. It is, for sure. For sure. But I think it's for a reason, you know, and it's also the longest chapter in the book. It's kind of, in a way, and I hate to use this phrase, it's a little bit of like a turning point, like a capstone. Like a lot of the themes we've been trying to, anyway, pick up over the past couple classes, talk about a little bit, investigate. They start to bear fruit in chapter 5, if any of that makes any kind of sense. So my aim today is, number 1, to make sense out of chapter 5, hopefully. But number 2, this should inform your reading of the rest of the book, what we talk about today. So it's pretty important, actually. All right, to begin with, I want to talk about some characters we meet on 119 in the big book. If you're in the smaller book, we'll try to figure it out. It's only a couple pages, I think, into chapter 5. Let's say that, now I'm turning. Yeah, I mean, in the big book, it's like 5 or so pages into chapter 5. I guess 9, if I could count. We're talking about the Englishman, by the way. If you're in an e-copy, if you're looking at an electronic copy, you can probably look up, well, that wouldn't work because they say that a lot. Yeah, that'd be a good one. That doesn't come up too much. Anyway, so whatever copy you're looking at. All right. So what I'm curious about, I just want to describe these guys, okay? What do we know about them? And we'll read about them a little bit, but I wanted you on these pages so you could maybe scan it if you need to. What are these guys like? What kind of guys are they, do you think? Maybe we shouldn't start cold. I'll read a paragraph. These like 2-3 pages are all about these guys. I'll read this one paragraph. The Englishmen, we just refer to them as a group, had also been lifting weights and shinning themselves for years. Their bellies were like washboards. The muscles of their calves and upper arms were like cannonballs. They were all masters of checkers and chess and bridge and cribbage and dominoes and anagrams and charades and ping pong and billiards as well. They're good at stuff. What kind of guys are these? Other than English, how do you picture these guys? Do what? Not clean? No, wait, everybody around them is not clean.
Yeah, like they take care of themselves.
They for sure take care of themselves. And let's break that phrase apart a little bit, because that can mean several things. In what ways do they take care of themselves? They work out. They have abs like washboards. They got other stuff like cannonballs, right? Like they're jacked.
Exercise their minds.
They do. They keep busy with this fucking laundry list of... What is all that, by the way? Checkers and chess and bridge and cribbage and dominoes and anagrams and charades and blah, 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 blah. What is all that? We have a word for what those things are. They're games. They're games. So, like, the way you talk about it is for sure how they would spin it. And it's not wrong to say they, like, exercise their minds. And I think everything we know about these guys, they would say that's important to do. Is that class not here today? Weird. It's too early in the semester for that. Anyway, I'm judging that lady now. So they work on their minds, they work on their bodies. That's for sure how they would talk about it. And I'm not shitting on that. You know, that's a good idea. But when we stop for just a second and think about it, think back last week, by the way, the paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs you guys read, all the stuff Weary carries, right? And I told you then, there's a point to Vonnegut giving you that paragraph. He's not just trying to torture you, although I think maybe he's doing that a little bit. He's having fun. It's also, he wants to really stress the burden this guy was under, all the shit he's carrying, right? This is a much shorter list, but it's long for what it is. Like, we get it. After 3 of them, that'd be enough, right? We get it. They play games, okay. So he's really stressing the point here that they play all these games. How else could we talk about that? They're always working out, they're always playing games. What kind of guys are these? We know guys like this. I mean, considering everything for sure, but a little more specific than that. Look, I mean, again, let's all they do is work out and play games. That's basically all they do. What kind of guys are these?
They have like vanity traits.
I mean, yeah, but
They're rich. They don't have anything.
we're gonna come to that. We're gonna come to that. But before that, what did you say, Miles?
Like I do.
Yeah. You guys don't know any kind of guy that all they do is like work out and play games?
Gym bros.
Did somebody say me? Yeah. Like 20-year-old dudes. Like capital D dudes. Yeah. They didn't have video games back then, but if they did, they'd probably be playing Call of Duty the whole time. Like that's what we're talking about. They're that kind of person. And again, there's good things about that, and there's reasons they're doing those things. They are trying to remain active, for sure. But the flip side is, it's also like if you look at it in another way, they're really just working out and playing games. Ping pong, you know? It's hard to take a dude seriously if somebody told you, "What do you do with your free time?" I play ping pong. Well, what else do you do? No, man, I play ping pong all the time. Like, oh, you're a weird guy. So I say that to say, I don't think Vonnegut wants us necessarily to take these guys super seriously, right? Now, of course, there are serious elements, and you mentioned, to get the line right, it's they were among the wealthiest people in Europe. In what way? He tells us, but I'm curious if you guys remember. In terms of food. Now, does anybody remember, because I don't want to have to read that whole paragraph, how does this even happen? How do they have all this food? They're in fucking prison. Yeah.
They had like it was like an aid thing that said
Red Cross.
The Red Cross instead of 50, it said like 500.
It was a clerical error. Somebody filled out a form the wrong way, and they got way too much food. Which is super important. Why? They're not just in a prison camp, because they are. What's going on in that prison camp? The narrator tells us a couple times. They're,
Visitors.
huh?
Visitors.
They have visitors, which is weird. You don't usually get those, I think, in German prison camp. Well, here, I'll help you guys a little bit. They're in the very middle of the prison camp, right? Why? Anybody remember? They were always trying to escape. They were worried about they were going to escape. Okay? So they're right in the middle. But that's not really what's important. What's important is, what are they in the middle of? He calls it a sea a couple of times, but it's not water. If I can find the exact quotation, I'll give it to you. I just thought that might have done it for you. No, unfortunately. But that ties into our earlier conversation about like the way we talk about people. They're in the middle. I'm not going to find it at this moment. They're in the middle of a sea of dying Russians, he says. Why are all these Russians dying? Because they're what? They're hungry. So they're on like a little island in the middle of that sea of sadness, kind of looking out, putting on their plays, working out, playing games, and everybody around them is like, "Bro, I'm dying. Have like a taco." That's kind of that feels intentional, I guess I'll say. And again, to be fair to these guys, you do got to look out for number one. You do have to survive. It is a prison camp. Like, I don't think we're just knocking them completely. But to get a full picture of them, they are wealthy, and they seem pretty carefree given the circumstances. Do you know what I mean? They don't seem as worried as I would be if I were in a German prison camp in the 40s. I'd be pretty sketched out. They seem fine. They seem good. And it's because of all these, I don't know how else to describe it, advantages, right? They have all these advantages over other people in super similar ways to ways we've already talked about. Okay. Resulting from all that, I suppose, one other weird thing we learn about these guys is that the Germans like them. their captors, the guards. They hang out with them. They talk to them. They give them stuff, right? Does anybody remember why? He does tell us. Yeah.
They say that he thinks that England, or the Germans think that the English are what fighter like enemies should be.
What Englishmen ought to be,
Yeah.
which is important. He says one thing after that. Does anybody recall? That's super important. That's the sort of thing I would really hope you would underline or take a note about, or, you know. It's right after one of those breaks.
That made war look stylish and reasonable.
And fun. They make war look cool. Right? Why do you think, and this is not on the page, so this is something we would have to do. Why do you think their German captors would like them for that? Because they make war look stylish and reasonable and
They're
fun.
the same way.
Huh?
The Germans were the same way.
What do you mean?
They had this idea that war was like this, like the Americans had a different idea of it, but they talk about, I think they talk about what Napoleonic something. They had this idea that war was like formal.
Yeah, I mean, to not get super in the weeds here, we had a weird turn of the century idea, especially in Europe, that war was like honorable and all these things, and that's why you have rows of people walking into gunfire in World War I, because you know, they didn't know what a machine gun was. That's not quite what we're talking about here. Slow down on that. Slow down on that. It's much easier. It's much easier than that. Anyway, we've talked about this before. Making war look cool.
Is it just the fact that other people are going to be the Germans?
In a sense, I suppose, yeah. That's for sure wrapped up in it. These Englishmen are by far some of those masculine figures in the book, right? They look the part, they act the part. A big issue between them and the Americans is the Americans are, whatever they are, when they run into them, they're not men, right? The way the Englishmen would define it. For sure, for sure. And I think the Germans would like that. But again, we're not talking about masculinity here. Like on the page we say they make war look stylish and reasonable and fun. What else does that in this book? I'll just cut to the chase. There's one other thing we've talked about that makes war look cool.
Stories.
Movies. Yeah. No, the movies are the stories we tell now, because none of you read. Now think about this for a second. We only know a couple more things about the Englishmen. For instance, what are they doing when the Americans show up? But they're doing another thing that's real weird.
They're putting out a play.
Yeah.
Cinderella.
Yeah. In the middle of a prison camp.
With nothing but men as the actors.
Yeah. But just, that's weird. Right? That's notable. I'm going to tell you guys something. Anytime you're reading a book, you're watching a movie or a show, anything like that, if someone is putting on a play or they're writing a book, if they're composing a story of some kind in the middle of a story, 97% of the time they want you thinking about that. They're pointing out to you that a story is taking place, that a performance is taking place, right? What do you do if you're putting on a play? You need a bunch of actors. This is not an accident, is what I'm telling you, okay? And again, we come back to this idea from earlier in the book about war films and how they depict war and how it's inaccurate and how it makes war look cool, and we like them for that, right? Mary's concerned with it. And you have these Germans who are like, man, those Englishmen are badass. Give them whatever they want, I don't care, they're really cool. They make me feel good about this whole thing. There's one other thing we know about the Englishmen, and you guys, in my experience, never see this, okay? They're super different from the Americans. We agree on that. The Englishmen, when the Americans show up, they're all jacked and putting on a play, and they're singing. If you remember that, when the Americans get there, they're singing. What do the Americans look like when they show up? And or how do they act?
Dirty rags and stuff.
Yeah, and they kind of act accordingly. when you started, I wasn't sure if you were giving me a physical description or a behavioral one. Yeah, they kind of are dirty in their behavior too, right? Like at one point, the Englishmen tried to have the Americans vote on a leader, which is super hilarious coming from a British guy talking to a bunch of Americans. I don't know if you know your history super well, but like we kind of had a war about some of that shit, you know? And the Americans are like, fuck off. Like, they're like, we're not doing that. Which tells you where their headspace is at. My question is, and it is in the book, why are they so different? This is war, and it's awful, right? From everything Vonnegut has told us. And yet, the Americans, I think, are more in line with what we expect, given how Vonnegut is talking about this stuff, okay? The Englishmen, it seems more like a movie. The way the Germans look at him, it's like a movie about war. So how can that be? Like, how can they be so different, do you think? It's on page 118 in the big book. And if you're following along in the little book, if you found where we were in the little book, you basically just flip to the previous page. It's after one of those breaks, too. Those little 3-dot breaks he gives us. Yeah, what's up?
Because they're all officers.
No.
Or because they hadn't seen a woman or a child. Like a sparrow.
And somehow they're happier as a result. Kids do ruin everything. No, check it out. These, and this is a very interesting description, these lusty, ruddy vocalists were among the first English-speaking prisoners to be taken in the Second World War. And that's like a throwaway thing, you know? It's one of the first things you learn when you meet them. But what's the narrator telling us about these guys?
Been captive for a really long time.
Yeah. And again, given what we know, that must be horrible, right? But then we find out more about their imprisonment, and it's not horrible, by the sound of it. Where have they not been, as opposed to where have the Americans been? Huh? War. The Americans have been in war. The Englishmen just act like it. Right? That is the profound difference between these two groups. The Americans look like shit and they act the part because they've been in battle. The Englishmen, no. He says they've been here for years. Working out, playing games, putting on plays. So they're the movie version, the live action version. Versus the Americans who are the real soldiers who look like shit. And that's why the Germans like them. Because we don't want to see the true story. We want the movie version. Awesome. All right. Changing gears entirely. I want to review a little bit of what we talked about next time because it's going to help us in what I actually want to talk about. Just to give you guys a hint of what's coming, I'm going to ask you a question at some point, and you're not going to probably have an answer for it. So look forward to that. Anyway, in the big book, it's on 149. I wonder, it's got, well, man, this is like 3/4 of the way through chapter 5, so I don't, it's not far. It's a couple pages before this picture, if that helps you at all, if you're in the little book. And if you're in an e-copy, you could look it up with, probably Test Pilot would probably get you there. I can't imagine that comes up very often in the book. And again, mostly I just want you on this page so you have it for reference. The question I had was, at one point, Billy's talking to the Tralfamadorians. He's back in the zoo, you know, because again, you know your history, World War II, alien zoos. Anyway, they tell him how the universe is going to end. Does anybody remember what that is?
They were gonna blow him up.
Yeah.
He was asking why.
Mm-hmm. They're testing new fuels. Test pilot hits the button. It destroys the entire universe. And Billy asks what I would imagine is the super obvious question, which is what?
Why don't you like prevent them?
If you know he's going to do that, maybe we just don't. And of course, knowing what we know about the Tralfamadorians, we talked about fate last time, destiny. The Tralfamadorian says what, basically?
He's always pissed.
Yeah, and he always will. Well remembered. There's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing I can do about it. The moment is constructed that way. They like to say that a lot, you know. And again, like we talked about last time, if fate is a real thing, and according to the Tralfamadorians it is, yeah, there wouldn't be anything you could do, even if you knew about it, which is strange. I wanted that fresh in our minds because what I actually want to talk about. Well, ooh, I skipped ahead a little bit. I'm sorry. I think it's on the next page. I want to make sure it is. Yeah. So if you turn the page from the one we were just on. So they continue talking. They talk about war. They talk about preventing the end of the universe. And the Tralfamadorian says, no, we have war. You know, it's just we're not having war today. And he says this. I'm trying to figure out who's talking real quick. Yeah, so Billy says, but you do have a peaceful planet here. And the Tralfamadorian says, today we do. On other days, we have wars as horrible as any you've ever seen or read about. There isn't anything we can do about them, so we simply don't look at them. We ignore them. We spend eternity looking at pleasant moments, like today at the zoo. Isn't this a nice moment? And again, I point that out to you, that can feel a little throwaway. But bear in mind, everything the Tralfamadorians talk about is purposeful. Like, honestly, they're a little bit of a plot device. They're not really characters. Like, can you even envision what they look like? He tells you at one point. But he says they're like a plunger with hands at the top. It's goofy. They're silly. They're all about saying something about fate, something about destiny, something about free will that Vonnegut, I think, wants us to know, wants us to think about. Okay? So this whole part about, I'll ask you guys. He says they have war, they just ignore it. They don't think about it. They only think about the good things. Does that feel like a valid way to be? To just not pay attention to that stuff? Like, are there any dangers, I suppose, inherent to that mindset? Just ignore the bad times. Just the only thing. That could be a good way to live, I guess. You know,
Not aware of what's going on though.
of like the reality.
Yeah.
If you only look at the good stuff, is there a danger to that, or is there some other like adverse effect?
I mean, there could be kind of like a heads up that they.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they know what's going to happen. Anyway.
Yeah, no, they're good on that regard. I mean, again, there's a difference between us and them. They would see shit coming, we would not. All right. Well, I want us thinking about that, and this is the part that I'm pretty sure you guys will struggle with, but that's okay. How far do we want to go into this actually? Ugh. I got in trouble the last time I taught this class with one of you. Lit me up on the little sheet you get at the end because we talked about their honeymoon. Let's do it anyway. All right, real quick. We covered this last time. I wanted you aware of it in the hopes that you would see it. But I'm going to show you one more in case you missed it. And I'd like to say too, I didn't write the book. And I also think Vonnegut's doing it for a reason. I'm not trying to. Anyway, somebody got real upset last time. So, we move around a lot. That's kind of a given at this point. I'm not telling you things you don't know. Right after we're in the zoo with Billy on Tralfamador, we're back on his honeymoon night with Valencia. And there's no other way to say this. I'm just going to read it. Okay. This is right after one of those breaks on 151. Billy made a noise like a small rusty hinge. He had just emptied his seminal vesicles into Valencia, had contributed his share of the Green Beret. And then they go on to talk about Tralfamador and how weird that is. Now he rolled off his huge wife, whose rapt expression didn't change. He lay with the buttons of his spine along the edge of the mattress. He had been rewarded for marrying a girl nobody in his right mind would have married. This is their honeymoon. Love is in the air here. How are we talking about these people? Their honeymoon night.
Well, one's really into it, one also not.
Huh, she seems happy. I assume you're talking about Valencia. Her rapt expression. Yeah, she seems happy. Good for her. Billy, I could say, I don't think we say he's unhappy, but he's not. He's Billy about it. You know?
He's satisfied in another sense of the word. Like,
Yeah.
he's happy with what he's going to receive because of this.
Oh, for the marrying a girl nobody in his right mind would have married? What is that, by the way, do you think? What does he get?
Well, he gets the Buick Roadmaster, all electric home, office, job.
He gets a life. He gets a career. He gets set up. That like weird end of the rainbow for a lot of you while you guys are in school. Yeah, he gets that for marrying a girl nobody in his right mind would have married. And that's enough for him. And I think that language is key. Again, we've talked about this in a very different context with the poems probably a couple weeks ago. But this is full on Billy. Think about this for a second. It's not he's going to be super loaded, although it seems like he's going to do well enough, right? But again, it's that word, enough. It's enough for him to like not be destitute, to not really have any worries, to be comfortable. But that's kind of his whole life. That's his whole marriage. I think it's on the next page. Yeah. Here, I'll skip ahead a little bit because we can have a fuller conversation this way. So they're talking a minute later. Thank you, said Valencia at last. The headboard was singing a mosquito song. That's just him being a writer. But Valencia says, thank you. Billy says, you're welcome. She says, it was nice. Then she began to cry. What's the matter, Billy says. I'm so happy. Good. I never thought anybody would marry me. This is a moment. Valencia's being super, I guess, fragile here, right? Billy responds with, She says, I'm going to lose weight for you. Billy goes, what? Also a fair response. You're like, what? She says, I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to become beautiful for you. He says, I like you just the way you are. She says, do you really? And he says, really? Then the narrator says, he had already seen a lot of their marriage thanks to time travel, knew that it was going to be at least bearable all the way. Let's talk about that for a second. When you guys, and look, when I was around 20, for sure, marriage was not on my radar at all. So, if it is on yours, if it's not, that's fine. Well, that's not really what we're saying, okay? What I'm asking here is, when you envision marriage. Actually, today's my 10th anniversary. Yeah, that's pretty wild. Yeah, that's how long my parents made it. Anyway. Yeah, I know. Anyway, when you guys envision marriage, when you think maybe one day, whenever it is, you decide to do that, what is that, right? Like, how do you picture it? What's like the story, maybe?
Bearable doesn't come to mind.
No! That doesn't even make the list, does it? I mean, you'd hope on your worst day it'd be bearable, right? Okay, good. What does come to mind then?
You actually liking the person you're going to marry.
Liking would be good. Well, again, to be fair to Billy, he doesn't dislike her, you know. He doesn't like act.
He doesn't really like her. He likes what she comes with.
Yeah, well, yeah, the life that she offers him.
It says earlier in the book, like, he doesn't want to marry ugly old little women, you know. He does kind of directly say.
Okay, I forgot. I forgot that part.
Yeah.
That's pretty rough. We're pretty rough with her, the way we talk about her.
He tolerates her.
He does. From the jump. And again, look, I've heard all kinds of stories about marriage, and statistically, it doesn't always work out, right? It's about a 50-50 proposition at this point. But when you hear about tolerating a person, that is near the end of the line, usually.
Like if you tolerate somebody, you don't want to see them all the time. Like
Yeah.
your spare time is your spare time, and you don't want to spend it with them.
Yeah. But for him, it's from the jump. And look, in full-on Billy mode, that's what he wants. That's all Billy wants out of life. Is like comfortable enough, tolerate the person you're gonna spend the rest of your life with. You know? And again, I kind of wonder, this might, well, I don't want to make this connection for you yet. This matters. This isn't just ragging on Valencia just to rag on Valencia, okay? I'm gonna say that. I think this is important. The way Billy thinks about marriage and what it says about how he thinks about his life. And how I would imagine, for most of you anyway, it's super fucking different. Like you do, it's hard to see eye to eye with Billy on most issues. All right, we're almost to the part where I'm going to ask you guys some questions that you may not have answers for. All right. So at one point, beautiful people sail past, who we'll meet later in the book, by the way, because Vonnegut's a crazy person. But when the beautiful people were past, we're on 154 in the big book, Valencia questioned her funny-looking husband about war. It was a simple-minded thing for a female earthling to do, to associate sex and glamour with war. Now look, that's also pretty unkind to Valencia. We call her a simple-minded female earthling. But what is he saying she's doing here, if you could translate that? The associate sex and glamour with war. He's saying some thought process happens in her mind very quickly. What's going on? Because if we weren't clear, we skipped right over it in the hopes of saving my evaluation scores, I guess. But that whole seminal vesicle thing, like we make them into machines again, we make them into like medical objects when they're doing what? When they're fucking. Honeymoon night again, like it's supposed to be a really nice thing and like an expression of like all these like kind of feelings, and we cut the legs right out from under it, right, with all these medical terms. And we kind of bring it back here. We call her a female earthling rather than just like a woman. But the narrator tells us, because she's going to start a line of questioning, that she associates sex and glamour with war. Why do you think she does that? In this book, in particular. Again, I would say, I don't think this is an accident. I don't think Vonnegut just did this. I think it's on purpose. If you had to guess, in this book, why does Valencia associate sex and glamour and war? Why are those all connected in her head?
The masculinity of men going to war.
Yeah. Oh, and that's great too, because she thinks Billy's a badass.
And
Where
she
about-
mentions that he might have secrets as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, here we can read the conversation then, and then we'll. Do you ever think about the war? He says sometimes, and she says, "I look at you sometimes, and I get a funny feeling that you're just full of secrets. I'm not." This was a lie, of course. He hadn't told anybody about all the time traveling he'd done, about Tralfamadore and so on. Now we understand she is not talking about any of that. She's not like, oh, alien zoo. No. What does she mean? Secrets. What does she think she knows about him? You can start us off, because you kind of just...
Like he has all these probably war stories.
Yeah.
He's
Look, we have that phrase. Do you know what I mean? In our culture, we have the phrase war story. And immediately it conjures certain images, right? Certain associations. What do we think about before we even get to Billy? Because he's a different case. War stories. What are those? Usually...
Epic tales of heroic deeds or something like
That feels pretty accurate.
the first scene of Saving Private Ryan, we're swimming the beaches in Normandy.
Yeah.
Something exhilarating and exciting like that.
Yeah. And like, and again, it sounds a lot like Weary's story that he never gets to tell his folks because he dies. But it sounds like that, right? So when she says, you have secrets, she's saying, I know you did things, you're so cool. But of course, we know Billy. Billy's never done a cool thing in his life. That's not who he is, nor is it who he wants to be. And again, this gets back to what the narrator is saying. Why do you think, given what we know about in the book, I think the narrator is trying to make a point for us. Valencia has a whole list of assumptions for Billy based upon his time as a soldier, right? Where's she getting these ideas? She didn't go. They didn't allow that sort of thing back then.
Books and movies and stuff.
Yeah. It's another one of those, like, because Mary is primarily worried about people actually going to war, which makes sense. But this is another part of it. It's not like the people that fight, the people that serve, that they're the only ones sort of privy to that narrative. It affects all of us. It affects, and we talked about this early this semester, it affects how we think about soldiers. If you see a person out in the world with like a thing on, you assume so much about them. Statistically speaking, some of them are probably great. Some of them are probably dirtbags. Like, that's just how it works. But they're all the same person. They're all the same kind of person because we saw movies. And that told us what to think about them, right? She's doing that here. And, I mean, it honestly kind of sounds like she doesn't know Billy at all, right? Continuing. He says, I'm not full of secrets, even though, he has some really weird ones. You must have secrets about the war. Or not secrets, I guess, but things you don't want to talk about. He says no, which kind of means yes. I'm proud you were a soldier. Do you know that? Billy says good. Was it awful? He says sometimes. A crazy thought now occurred to Billy. The truth of it startled him. It would make a good epitaph for Billy Pilgrim, and for me too. And now, because Vonnegut is a weirdo, on the next page, he gives you a full-length drawing of that epitaph. An epitaph, by the way, those are the words on a gravestone, okay? If you're using the e-copy, I know sometimes it doesn't come with these, which is kind of a bummer, because Vonnegut's weirdly famous for his doodles, okay? Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt. That's the epitaph that Billy goes, oh, that would really work for me. And the narrator agrees that it would work for the narrator too. And this is the part where conversation ceases. So I'm going to ask you guys, what the hell is that about? And you're going to go, I don't know. I was near the end. I just kept reading. What's an epitaph about? Like, why do we even have them? What's their function?
Tell us about somebody's life.
Okay. Yeah, and look, it's a lot of pressure on like very few words. It's not just telling you about someone's life, it's in a way like summing it up, right? Somebody's epitaph, whatever, sometimes it's like a quotation, other time, but it's like a really, really tight thing that is supposed to express to you something really important to them. So that's this for Billy. Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt. Somehow, according to Billy, really sums him up. We got to think about that. For instance, what do we know about Billy's life? Was all of it beautiful? Did nothing hurt? That's an honest question. What do you guys think with what we know about it? I see a couple people shaking their heads. Why? Like, what are some things we know about him that I suppose either were not beautiful or did not hurt, or did hurt? You understand?
I feel like it did hurt. It's just, he was just like, it's not him to be like, wow, that hurt. Like, you know what I mean?
He just brushes it like to
Yeah.
the side. He doesn't.
Like, it's not that big of a deal.
So it goes.
Well, let's push on that. I mean, you guys are right. Let's push on it a little bit. We talked about this. We talked about it today. Okay? If we understand, I mean, look, he went to a German prison camp. He saw all kinds of people die. We haven't gotten there yet, but he's going to see the firebombing of Dresden, where like a whole bunch of people are burned to death. Like he saw some shit, all right? So to do that, and then to say at the end of all of it, everything was beautiful, nothing hurt. I think it requires more than like one of these, you know? Yeah.
Is it almost like with the alien people, how they chose to like ignore human use?
Yes. I think it's a conscious decision on some level. And again, if you and this is a weird exercise, don't go do this, it puts you in a weird headspace. But like over the weekend, if you're like, I wonder what my epitaph would be. That's a conscious decision, right? In the same way, I think that the Tralfamadorian, when he says to Billy, you know, we have wars, we just don't think about them because they're awful, and things are better. We feel better about life as a result. That's what Billy is doing. And if you really, I suppose, committed to that, everything could be beautiful, nothing hurts, right? Because you almost delete it from your brain, type of thing. But because this is like a Tralfamadorian mindset, this also tells you this is Billy full on signing up for all of it. Like fate, free will is not real. That was really hard to say. That's him doing that, right? Conversely, and I'm also a little bit scared because I haven't checked in a while. What time is it? Sweet. All right. Conversely, the narrator says it would work for him too. And that strikes me as odd. We haven't heard from the narrator a lot since the first chapter. I mean, he shows up in really weird moments. But generally, he's been absent. So I'm kind of curious. This could be trickier. Do you guys... I mean, on the one hand, we could have a simple question first. Do you feel like the same way the epitaph works for Billy, it would also work for the narrator? Like, basically, I'm saying, do they strike you as the same kind of person? If you're not sure, it's okay. So let's think about this. Again, we haven't seen the narrator since the first chapter. What do we know about the narrator from the first chapter? We learned some things. Like, he was also in the war, okay? What else do we know about him? Like, what's he doing? Do we know any of his motivations? Trying to write, like about the war, right? He wants to get it right. And we didn't have a lot of time to talk about that day. But what does that mean? Again, he's told us he's thrown out thousands of pages. He keeps outlining it and wanting to talk to people. And like, what does it mean in this context? He wants to get it right. What does that tell you about the narrator? Yeah, well, in this one regard, right? Somebody else said something too, I thought. Well, but so what? Like this isn't wanting. I hate that this is my life, but like the example I'm thinking of my kid. This isn't wanting to get your village right in Minecraft. Like this is wanting to tell this story right, to maybe have it perfect or whatever. But why? Why do you think that is? Why does he care so much? And already, by the way, I think we know he's not Billy if he cares. That's not Billy.
He doesn't want to misrepresent that.
Yeah. So on the one hand, he wants to keep his promise to Mary, right? But we could go further. I think there's other reasons he doesn't want to misrepresent it, right? That's for sure part of it. He wants to get it right. He wants to tell it accurately, right? And part of that is, not to make it look cool and whatever. Why else, though? Why else get it right? Why else feel that pressure, you think, to get it right? Again, to throw out thousands of pages.
Because there's so many misconceptions on it.
Yeah. Why is it so important to him, though, do you think?
Like his legacy.
I mean, yeah. He was, like, fairly famous at the time. But I take your point. I mean, yeah, to a degree. I think it's simpler than that, though. I think it's, to help you guys a little bit, I think it's more human than that. If he did misrepresent it, right? If he did get it wrong, so what? What would be some of the problems maybe stemming from that?
If he like romanticized it,
Sure.
though, Mary would be mad.
Yeah.
Kids with each woman. So.
Yeah. Well, what would get misrepresented if he did that? If he did get it wrong?
That everybody that goes to war is like on the same level, and in the book it shows you how like Billy goes to war and he's not shit, but he comes back and his wife thinks that he is.
Yeah. Yeah. What else other than Billy? I think this will help if we get like a little bit of an inventory for you guys. What else would be misrepresented if you got it wrong?
So.
Yeah? Yeah? Who else?
All people die.
Yeah! Seems like that matters to the narrator. Right? He wants to get it right. It matters. It matters a lot. He's been working on it for years. Because again, I'll tell you this, and you don't want to conflate the narrator with Vonnegut, but they are like kind of the same person. The book came out in 1969. I don't know if you know your history. World War II did not end in 1969. Ended in the 40s. So he's been working on this book for about 20 years. That's a long time. That's a long time. It matters. He wants to get it right for all the reasons we said, but I think also there's something about not wanting to misrepresent those people who like can't speak for themselves for like super obvious reasons, right? Like wanting to get the story correct. So all that, and yet when Billy has this epitaph, everything was beautiful and nothing hurt, the narrator goes, yeah, that sounds good for me too. Well, what do we know? What do we know Billy is doing that the narrator is absolutely not doing? There's one important thing.
Not caring.
Yeah, but a little more specific. So like, to recap, how can Billy with a straight face say everything was beautiful and nothing hurt? Because he does what? No, we said it a minute ago. What? He ignores it. He lies to himself, convincingly. But we know the narrator doesn't do that. The whole fucking book is him looking at that stuff, right? Albeit in a weird way with aliens. Okay, we can't, we'll talk about them at some point. But he is trying to see that stuff. So again, my question would be, how can he say that the epitaph would also work for him? For my money, he and Billy are pretty opposed on this, right? I'll put it to you this way. And I'm not Vonnegut, but he's not either anymore. He's been dead for a while. He would appreciate that joke. Don't worry about it. Right? That's kind of what an epitaph looks like. That's supposed to be grass. When you walk past, we kind of said this already, but who's an epitaph for?
Dead person.
They don't give a shit.
People that read about it.
Yeah, whoever, loved ones for sure, but also anybody who happens by, right? It's like a billboard that outlives you in some sense, right? And there's great import for that reason. But say you're walking through a graveyard, you got weird hobbies, okay, and you're walking by, and you just, as you pass, you read one that says everything was beautiful and nothing hurt. What would you assume about that person? There's a couple options.
They live a happy life.
That's one. What are some other options?
They lie to themselves a lot.
If you're a little cynical, yeah. What are some other options? There's kind of one in between, I suppose, of those. Either they were insanely optimistic or they were lying to themselves, although maybe those actually might be the same thing. But what's the other option? Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt. Where is it? Where do you encounter this text?
That's
What is it? Thank you. What do you know for sure happened at least once in their lives?
They die.
Something hurt.
They
At least once. One good time. It was a real bitch. Yeah. Might it matter that it's on a gravestone? Yeah.
That's a pretty strong question to put on the headstone.
Yeah. Well, especially, like, it'd be different if it was on a stuffed bunny. You read it differently. So again, my question is, what might it say about the person, I suppose, therein interred, if it's on their headstone? Everything is beautiful and nothing hurt. What do you know about that person, other than the options we've already listed?
I would say they're weird, because that's just something weird to put on a headstone.
Weird is a good start. Let's push on that a little bit. What kind of person will put that on a headstone, other than severely, like terminally optimistic? Okay, other than that kind of person. Okay.
Psychotic.
Well, no. But why do you think they're doing it? Suppose for just a second they're not totally unhinged. Okay, like yes,
Maybe like a life lesson. Like they wanna.
that would be the happy person. That like, I'll say it to you this way. Oh, go ahead.
One of those dark humor things.
Ah, what do you mean?
Like you know, like I feel like you know what I'm saying, but I don't know how to explain it. Just like whenever like it's a serious topic, it's like whenever he goes, so it goes.
Yeah,
But,
I would say it's a similar tone for sure.
so like he knows that it's important, but he's trying to make a joke out of it because he just at the end doesn't care.
So when you, well, I don't know if I go quite that far, but look, put it this way. If you say a thing you don't believe and it's a joke, we have a word for that.
Irony.
It's ironic. It's also sarcastic. It's on a headstone. When you encounter everything is beautiful and nothing hurt,
They're dead.
you would titter.
Yeah.
That's a fancy word for laugh. Smallly. It's sarcastic. And again, weird place to make a joke. So maybe kind of a weird guy. That's kind of funny. Yeah. The point I'm telling you here is, it would work for both of them. Billy, we got that nailed, I think. He's doing the Tralfamador thing, not intentionally ignoring bad information. Okay. The narrator takes on all the bad information, and similar to So It Goes, similar to how we've talked about other things in the book, he wants us to see how ridiculous it is. Right? That's his whole project. Billy's a ridiculous person. Right? I think he wants us to see that. And somehow, if we haven't picked up on that by chapter 5, he's going to draw us a picture. Basically. What time is it now? I'm sorry. All right, we got one more thing I want to do. It's much earlier in the book. It doesn't make a ton of sense until you get much further in the book. So here we go. It's on 28 in the big book. It is the very last page of chapter 1. If you're in the small book, if that helps you find it. If you're in an e-copy, you could find it with Lot's wife. Lot apostrophe S wife. That'll get you to the.
I remember seeing that actually.
Yeah, and kind of going, huh?
How it kind of like went back on the boutique meat, the British church and everything.
Oh yeah, well yeah, that's gonna come around. That is how the book ends. But it's weird. It's weird. Okay? So on the previous page, he gives us the story. But maybe you guys could do it. This is the American South. Anybody, Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot's wife, anybody know how that story goes? Can you help us out real quick? What happens?
She was told not to look back at the destruction of the city, and she could help herself.
2 cities that were pretty rough. In some versions, they try to rape angels, that sort of thing. Pretty rough towns. This is Old Testament, by the way. So Old Testament God is like, the fuck you will, and fire and brimstone destroys everybody. But Lot is like the one decent guy in town. He's like gonna work. It's similar to the Noah story, right? He's like, hey, by the way, you probably want to leave now. And he says, but you can't look back. Famously, Lot's wife does. The narrator tells us this on 28. And Lot's wife, of course, was told not to look back where all those people and their homes had been. But she did look back, and I love her for that because it was so human. So she was turned to a pillar of salt, so it goes. People aren't supposed to look back. I'm certainly not going to do it anymore. And then he says, his next book is going to be fun. This one is a failure and had to be since it was written by a pillar of salt. Okay, so he's doing several things there. We'll start at the top. Lot's wife looks back, because that's how the story goes. He says, of course, But he says that's a human thing to do, and he loves her for it. Which, if you know the story, you were probably taught the story at some point. I certainly was, because I went to an interesting preschool. That's not the lesson in the story, usually. What's the lesson in the story, if anybody knows?
You shouldn't look back.
It's obedience.
You listen to God.
Yeah. Or else. But he seems to firmly disagree with that. He takes a different lesson from the story. He says her looking back is so human, and he loves her for it. What's human about looking back, do you think?
You can't let it go easy.
Okay, what is it, do you think? Like, what do you mean? I'm with you, but like, what can't she let go?
A place she loved, or a place she lived in for a long time.
Okay. Let's press on that some. So, like, this is BC, whatever, and long time ago. No Priuses type of thing. She's not vacationing places. She's not going anywhere. This is her whole world. These towns. This is it. Even if the people are despicable, and according to the story they are. That's all she knows. Those are her neighbors. Those are her friends that are gone. Don't look back. She has to, according to what the narrator tells us, right? It's the human thing to do. You have to look back. So he says she can't let it go. Can we talk about it in any other kind of way? I think it's part of it, like the inability to let it go. We could also try to define that a little more. What does that even mean? She can't let it go. All these people and places she knew. This is her world, right? How does that make her human?
Because you can't forget about it.
Good. Good. We're building an important list, by the way. Okay. Oh shit. That's the one thing I don't want to
She actually has remorse, like Billy. Billy would just say, so goes and keep going. He wouldn't.
You really get the sense Billy wouldn't have a problem not looking back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lot and his daughters didn't look back. So.
Do what?
I said Lot and his daughters didn't look back. They were just like, let's get out of here.
He's kind of implying that they're Billy in that situation, right? Yeah.
It shows that she just has some type of empathy, I guess, or some type of emotion.
It makes it seem like she cares more
Yeah.
than the other folks in the story. Yeah, and again, it really helps when you bring in Billy, because he for sure would give it a single shit.
I feel like it depends what you care about. Because the people in the story that didn't look back, they care more about what God thinks than what
Yeah.
his wife does.
Yeah. Well, and there's certain, it doesn't come up a lot in this book, but it comes up a little bit. Vonnegut / the narrator for sure has thoughts on like religion, which we probably won't talk about because I don't know how you guys feel about things. But yeah, that's part of it too. If we have time today, we can talk about in what way. But so, all that said, the narrator tells us, again, according to the story, she gets made into a pillar of salt by looking back. Of course, this is a punishment. That's how it works. Hell of a punishment, by the way. Like of all of it, that's really specific. But the narrator tells us he's a pillar of salt too. Well, that's a pretty easy one-to-one. What's he telling us he's done? He's looked back at what? Yeah. Good. She looks back physically, but also figuratively. That's her whole world, her whole past, her whole life. He looks back too, figuratively. But upon what? What are they looking back at? I thought that'd be an easier question.
Well, it's like the past.
Yeah. Well, what kind? Like what kind of stuff?
Well, if I'm dressed in it,
Yeah.
the Brimstone and the War can kind of be like
Like the
pretty
best.
similar.
Pretty like insane destruction and death, trauma, right? We have that word now.
It's wiped out.
Yeah. Things that, so if you're Billy, for instance, you'd probably rather forget. And actually, if you're Billy, you feel okay. You just go. But he's looked back at that for like 250 pages, you know, plus however many thousand he threw out in the process. Like, he's looked back at it hard, and he says he's a pillar of salt. What the hell does that mean? You think? Because this is important. We understand in the story she's a pillar of salt, but he's saying he is one too. What do you think that means? What does it mean to be made into a pillar of salt? We start there.
This is the
Huh?
you said obedience thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the story. But what does it have to do with him? Like, why is it a punishment? We'll start with an easy / weird question. Why would it be a punishment to be made into a pillar of salt? Again, I thought that would be an easy question.
What's up to be a pillar of salt?
Uh-huh. Why? What are you not? I've never said this before. What are you not if you're salt? There you go. You're fucking dead. Yeah. Like super dead. And that's why it's a punishment, right? You're destroyed. You've been destroyed if you're a pillar of salt. So the narrator is telling us what? Looking back has done what to him? It's destroyed. Like he's still walking, he's still talking, he's still writing, but he's fundamentally changed. He's something else now. To look back on all this, right? Maybe it would have been better, according to Billy's mentality, to have ignored it. But he hasn't done that. He's looked at it hard, and it's destroyed it. He tells us the human thing to do for the reasons that we've listed, right? Can't let it go. That's his world. It matters to him. Somebody mentioned empathy earlier, right? Yeah. This is why it matters. We talked before. This is why he wants to get it right. It's really important to him. But it also crushes him as a result. Cool. So that's why the epitaph works for the narrator. Because it's a sick joke. Alright. We're almost out of time now, I assume, right? Like 12 something. Alright, that's good enough. Alright. For next time. Oh, what is it? 6 and 7. Chapter 6 and 7. They are not, I don't think, collectively as long as 5, although don't quote me on that. You got 6 and 7 for next time. We're going to finish the book a week from today. So, I don't know, you read ahead if you want. You won't. But you could. 6 and 7, and I also get excited for this. Well, I'm just so distracted by the space technology in front of me. Sorry. No, you're good. I'm just like, that thing's about to take off. It's all lighting up, and I'm such a child. Anyway, chapter 6 and 7, I also am like 97% sure I'll have your papers ready for next class. So we're talking about those too. So be excited. I know you're excited. All right, I'll see you then. Thank you.